Okay. Hi, boys and girls. I want you to meet Grandma Jean. What happened to you a long time ago, like almost 30 years ago now?
I was coming home from town with my hands full of our supper, and somebody jumped from the side of the door, the side door, and put a knife right here in my, right there.
How did you feel?
And he said, "Don't say anything, don't do anything, and I won't hurt you." And I started going, I went, "Jesus, Jesus, Jesus."
And did he help you?
Well, I got out of it, but it took a while.
Well, what did the man do after you were yelling Jesus for a while?
Well, he just took me and threw me on the ground, and he ran as fast as he could and went right over our fence.
So Jesus did come and help you.
Yes. I was very glad, but I was scared to death.
Yes, you were.
And the policeman came and...
Do you remember what you did when he first started running away from you? I remember you said, "Wait, come back, I need to tell you about Jesus."
No, I don't remember about the Jesus part, but I remember I said, wait a minute, I want to talk to you some more.
Oh, maybe that's what it was.
He looked at me and went running.
Oh, that's very good.
Oh, yeah, I'm glad I can laugh about it now.
Yeah, that's right. We are too. Hi, boys and girls. Welcome to Storytime with Nonie. Do you remember how last time in our story of Hind's feet on high places, Much Afraid started on her journey with this shepherd? And do you know what she's supposed to do when she gets in trouble? She's supposed to call out to the shepherd, "Shepherd, come help me." And when we're in trouble, we call out, "Jesus, come help me." And we're going to see today how important that is to do. From the very beginning, the mountains were much steeper than Much Afraid had anticipated. She had not wanted to hold the hands of her helper's sorrow and suffering like the shepherd had told her to do, but as she got to places that seemed impossible to climb, Much Afraid did grab their hands, and she realized right away that as soon as she would take hold of one of their hands, that a pain would shoot through her hand. But she also realized that they seemed able to pull her and lift her up over places that would have been impossible for her to go all by herself. She also soon realized how important it was to hold the hands of her helper's sorrow and suffering, the ones that the shepherd himself had given to her, because to Much Afraid's surprise and distress, there were enemies on this path with her. You see, her fearing relatives who lived in the valley that used to be Much Afraid's home, they were very upset with her for leaving them, for escaping them. They had wanted to make her their slave to marry craven fear. But she was now gone, on her way to the high places with the shepherd that they hated so much. He was their enemy, and they didn't want to go to the high places themselves, but they just absolutely could not believe that Much Afraid should deserve to go there. She was just ugly, and she was crippled, and she was worthless in their eyes, and they wanted to bring her home. So they had a very big meeting. And they, at this big family meeting, came up with all sorts of ideas on how they could get Much Afraid back. Well, the one they finally decided on was a plan to send a distant cousin who was extremely strong and powerful and handsome to go capture Much Afraid and to talk her into coming back with him to the valley. They were sure he would be able to do it if anybody could, because his name was Pride. And Pride would be much too proud to come back to them without her. So one morning, as Much Afraid and Sorrow and Suffering were on a much more even path now, Much Afraid had just let go of their hands. And as they turned around a bend in the way on the path, here was Cousin Pride. And he greeted Much Afraid with a big smile on his face. Now, Much Afraid should have known not to stop and talk to any of her relatives from the valley. But you see, in the past, whenever Much Afraid had met Pride, he had always totally ignored her and made her feel so worthless and humiliated. And now this handsome young man is talking to her, and it made her feel really good that he would pay attention to her. He would also, when he would see her, he'd just tilt his nose up like, "I'm so much better than you are." And now he's talking to her like she's of great value to him. And this made her feel important. And so she greeted her cousin, Pride, back in return. And as Pride kept talking to Much Afraid, he reached out and took a hold of her hand, because she wasn't holding Sorrow and Suffering's hands anymore. He took a hold of her hand and he said, "Oh, dear cousin Much Afraid, please come back to the valley with me. I am so worried about you going on this journey. Do you know what will happen if you continue on? I know that this shepherd guy has made promises to you, but I know that he does not intend to keep any of these promises." You see, what he's going to do is he's going to take you up there to the mountains and the high places where you won't know how to get back home. And then he's going to leave you there. He's going to abandon you. And all the people in the valley are going to laugh at you for believing this shepherd. Much Afraid tried to pull her hand out of Pride's, but because she had listened to him, he was holding on to her so tightly she knew it was going to be difficult to let go. And the disturbing thought was, hadn't she had some of those very same fears herself? Hadn't she been wondering and doubting the shepherd's promises? Wasn't she wondering if maybe he wouldn't be able to give her hind's feet or give her a new name for whatever reason? She was trying to figure out what was true with him holding her hand so tightly. The things that he said sounded so right and so true, but there was something inside of her where the seed of love was that was not letting her completely believe him and fall for his tricks, because this is really all they were, tricks. He could not make her turn around and go back to the valley with him. He had to trick her into going with him. He had to lie to her to get her to go back. But she didn't know this just yet. And Pride, sensing Much Afraid's hesitation, said to her, "Much Afraid, what is it about these high places that is of such great value to you that makes this difficult journey worth going on? You see, Much Afraid, this journey's only going to get much more difficult. Why would you want to go on this journey? And Much Afraid said, well, the shepherd's going to give me Hind's feet so I can go leaping on the rocks just like him. And as she was just starting to believe that promise and remember that promise, all of a sudden, Much of her Pride's countenance seemed to change. And he said, "You?" He sneered at her. He just completely changed character from nice into this. When he saw it wasn't working to be nice, he turned mean and angry. He said, "You? What would make you think that you could go and ever belong to the kingdom of love? You are ugly. You're crippled. You're worthless. Don't you know that nothing except beautiful things can live in the kingdom of love?" And you know, Much Afraid knew that was true. You see, sometimes, boys and girls, the enemy puts a little bit of truth in what he's saying to us just to make it sound right. But, you see, Much Afraid had that seed of love that was beginning to grow in her heart. And even though Pride had said to her, "Nobody loves you in the valley. What makes you think that you're even lovable at all, that you can ever do this crazy thing that you've set out to do?" And Much Afraid, the more he talked and the tighter he held onto her hand, the more she wanted to turn back. She was beginning to think he was right. And then that seed of love that was growing in her heart let her see in her mind's eye the shepherd. She saw his kind eyes as he looked at her. And she heard his voice saying to her, "Much Afraid, I promise that I'm going to give you Hind's feet, and I promise you that I'm going to give you a new name." And at that moment, before Pride even knew what was happening, Much Afraid called out, "Shepherd, come quickly! Shepherd, come help me!" And all of a sudden, there was the sound of rocks tumbling, and before he knew what was happening, the shepherd was right there with his staff raised, and it came down on the back of Pride, knocked him to the ground. And Pride dropped Much Afraid's hand as he fell. He got up as soon as he could, and he ran down the hill as quickly as he could, around the mountain, out of sight. And the shepherd took hold of Much Afraid's hands, and he said, "Oh, Much Afraid, why did you let Pride take your hand? If you would have been holding on to your helper's hands, like I had told you to do, none of this would have happened." In that moment, Much Afraid knew she needed the helpers that the shepherd had given to her. She knew that even if it was painful, that they were there for a purpose that she didn't understand. But she was remembering what the shepherd had told her when she had asked him to carry her all the way by himself, and he had said, if he had done that, if he'd pick her up and carry her the whole way, she would never develop Hind's feet. She would never be able to be his companion and go the hard places. She knew that the shepherd was using sorrow and suffering in her life to help her to be able to become strong, to give her the ability that she needed to become just like him. This is a chicken egg. Have you ever seen a little chicken when it hatches out of the egg? You know, the mommy hen doesn't help it. That little chick has to work very, very hard to get out. But the mommy knows that if she were to help it, it wouldn't gain the strength that it needs to escape from this shell. And so she lets it work really hard. She lets it get very, very exhausted. It's hard. It must be hard for that mommy to watch that little baby struggle so much to get out of that shell. But she knows that's what's best for it. And she knows that if she lets it work all by itself to get out of that shell, that she will have beautiful, healthy baby chicks. And I think that's what the shepherd does with us sometimes. He's always right there, ready to help us when we call out to him to come and help us. But he also lets us go through things that seem very, very difficult sometimes, because he understands that that is building our character so that we can become like Jesus. Well, boys and girls, I love you very much. And I'll see you next time on Storytime with Nonie. Bye-bye.